Welcome back. Utah professor Stephen Jones has been placed on paid leave by Brigham Young University while the school investigates the increasingly speculative and accusatory nature of his claims. Jones questions official findings that explosive jet fuel turned the steel floor supports rubbery and brought down the World Trade Center, suggesting hidden explosives imploded the skyscrapers. His theory is not the only one out there, so do any of these myths stand up to the scrutiny? Jim Meigs is editor-in-chief of Popular Mechanics. He's also published the book Debunking 9/11 Myths. Jim, the first question would be, why do these theories, these hypotheses, they seem to be gaining traction? How can it be?
Well, you know, people are looking for answers, and I think that a lot of people still feel a sense of frustration that our government didn't do a better job protecting us, and a legitimate sense of anger at everything that went wrong that day. The sad thing is that the conspiracy theory movement exploits that by feeding people a lot of misinformation.
Jim, is there anything in particular that bugs you about that movement? Anything that you think has really allowed people to latch on to some of their claims?
Well, you know, the thing that really struck us, because we investigated 20 of the most common claims made by conspiracy theorists, is that in every case, when you dig down to the core facts that they cite, invariably they're based on misreporting, mistakes, errors. Every single one of them evaporates when you look at it up close.
Let's talk about the first theory. I guess this would probably be the one that would drive you crazy, that there were bombs in the building because the fire wasn't hot enough to melt the structure. Is that the one that bugs you the most?
Well, that's a very common one, and it's based on the misperception that you need to melt the steel for the building collapse. You know, there were 90,000 tons of the floors over the impact areas, and you had fires that were started by jet fuel but continued to be fed by lots of other material over 6 or 8 floors. No skyscraper of that kind of modern design would be able to handle that kind of combination of jet impact ripping out part of the frame and then fire over multiple floors of the building.
So what you're saying is you not just take the jet fuel, but you take the contents of that building and it creates an inferno.
And in fact, the contents of the building really were responsible for most of the heat transfer. The jet fuel actually did burn off relatively quickly, but you don't have to heat steel to the melting point. It just needs to soften up enough so it starts to creep and can't support the load.
How about the one where they say the plane really didn't go into the Pentagon because the hole wasn't big enough, it must have been a missile?
This is really something because, you know, hundreds of people saw that aircraft. But one thing you see a lot is the claim that an eyewitness said it looked like a cruise missile with wings. And you see that all over the world in websites. Well, we talked to that witness. He's a guy named Mike Walter, a broadcaster in Washington, D.C. And if you look at what he actually told CNN, it went something like, I looked up, I saw this plane, this jet, this American Airlines jet. It was going really low. It looked like a cruise missile with wings, and it went and hit the Pentagon. You know, when you see the full quote, you realize that the conspiracy people haven't misquoted him, but they've quoted him so out of context that it's become deeply misleading.
All right, and the last one. Someone shot down Flight 93. It wasn't the heroic act of those passengers.
And a lot of the evidence for this, supposedly, is the idea that cell phones don't work in airplanes. So all those cell phone calls that were made from Flight 93 to people's loved ones must have been faked by some kind of government computers or something like that. All we had to do to check that one is just go and talk to the cell phone companies. Turns out cell phones work reasonably well in airplanes. And, in fact, all the evidence from the impact site attests to an airplane that struck the ground at a very high velocity, nothing related to an air-to-air missile or anything like that.
Jim, thanks for taking it all head on. Very valuable information. Thanks for being with us. Coming up, how safe is it to fly today? An airline insider who's on the front lines will tell us. Also ahead.